היי, זה אייל. ברוכים הבאים לפרודקט בילדר, המקום לשיחות המוצר הכי מעניינות. אני הבעלים של יוזר פלואוז, ובין השאר המנחה של הפודקאסט הזה, והמטרה שלי כאן היא שנשפר יחד את הפרודקט סקילס שלנו. אם זו הפעם הראשונה שלכם פה, מקווה שתהנו. ואם כבר האזנתם וקיבלתם ערך, אשמח ממש שתשתפו את הפודקאסט עם חבר או חברה. אז יאללה, מתחילים. Hey Eden, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, it's so nice to have someone so cheerful here at 5 p.m.
I think I'm always on an energy high. It's kind of like the wavelength I operate at.
Wow, I love that. So, with us is Eden, who is a product manager at Wiz and also the co-host of Crying Out Cloud podcast.
Yeah.
Also part of Wiz, right?
Also part of Wiz.
So, let's start from the podcast just for a sec.
Cool.
So, tell us about it in a few sentences.
So after I joined Wiz, I was super excited about what I was learning in terms of what was happening in the cloud. But I realized that it wasn't very digestible to people outside of the world of cybersecurity. And I think it's important to note that I grew up in half in LA and half in Israel. And the LA side of me is obsessed with storytelling. And I grew up in Hollywood. Everything was like a cool, interesting story. And so I went to Raz Elsberg, who's the head of marketing at Wiz. And I said, I think we need a Wiz podcast. And she was like, let's do it. And a few weeks later, Amitai Cohen, who's the head of research at Wiz, and I sat down and we did the first podcast for Wiz, where we talk about incidents in the cloud. And we talk with really brilliant hackers and heads of red teams. And we take stories that are otherwise very complex when they're told in a research blog, and we tell them so they're understandable, so everyone can hear the impact of these stories. What does it mean that these incidents took place for the common people, if you will, and how did they happen?
And was there a business goal for that? By simplifying and creating engaging episodes around cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think that Wiz, at the end of the day, our goal is to empower teams to thrive in their security programs. And it's not led by fear mongering, but it's how do we give you context and how do we empower your teams to have the right tools to succeed? And so when you hear these stories, all of a sudden you're a more informed practitioner. And I think that was kind of the goal behind doing it.
Sweet. So we started with a quick promotion. So if you're into podcasts and cybersecurity, then we'll leave a few links below. And we're also going to discuss a few examples from there. But besides that, as you mentioned before, a sidekick, you also a product manager, right?
Yes, I have a real job at Wiz. I call it my real job to be a PM at Wiz, which is a really exciting part of my day-to-day.
So maybe let's start from anyone who hasn't heard about Wiz. Maybe you can give a quick spiel about Wiz.
Cool. I'll give you the real spiel, and then I'll give you the version I give my parents so they know what I do every day. What does Wiz do? Wiz helps organizations protect their cloud environment. So from development to production to runtime, we give a single unified platform where scanning takes place everywhere along the development lifecycle. And we're able to eliminate silos and help people in organizations have common context, which is really important because at the end of the day, security teams get bombarded with issues and notifications. And they're where do I start? Where do I begin? And so Wiz is super easy to connect. And then what we do is we prioritize risk. We find toxic risk combinations and we say, start here. Here is how you should go through improving your risk posture. And then on top of that, what Wiz does is we do something we call shifting left. So we help developers make sure that they detect the risks earlier before they reach production. And then we do the other side of things, shifting right, which is to stop cybersecurity attacks.
Cool. So you basically control the entire development cycle, let's say, and also, let's say, shifting left. Shifting left and shifting right is the first time I actually heard that. So what did your grandma or your parents told you when you said that?
So what I explained to them, because that to them is gibberish, is I say to them, imagine our garage was just in a disastrous state. It's our cloud environment is our garage. And if someone was going to break in, if we were going to find the diamond ring or they were going to find the diamond ring first is like God's guess. And so what Wiz does first is we turn on the lights really quickly. We turn them on. We make sure the lights are on. We know what's in our garage. And then we start to help prioritize risks. So what should be in the safe? Let's put it in the safe. Are the windows open? Are there buckets that are going to leak and cause damage? And so the first thing we do is we help you organize your garage and prioritize risk in your garage. And then in shifting left, we say, okay, your kids just came home with a bunch of mess. They came home from college. Before they put it in the garage, your OCD mom is like, okay, we're going to check what's good, what isn't good, and we're going to make sure what gets into the garage is in a good state. That's our production environment. And then we add an alarm system. And we say, okay, if the alarm goes off, is it wind? Is it a false alarm? Or is it an attacker? And if they're attacking, what are they going for? And what are we going to do about it? And so that's kind of how I explain to them what I do.
Great storytelling, they probably said. And eventually they asked you, like, who are the relevant personas that you are serving, right?
Well, they didn't, but you are. So that's good. But I think it's really interesting, right? Who are the personas is my mom and the garage being organized. But in cloud security, we're looking... at the end of the day, we have to adopt security in an organization. And the cloud, for example, it's relatively new. And how do we help security teams effectively adopt cloud security? And I think what Wiz does really well is we understand, okay, well, there's the practitioner. And how do we help the practitioner thrive? Whether it's the developer who has a ton of things people are asking them to build. So how do we make security really clear and contextualized for them? How do we then, we can go through all the practitioners and kind of improving their experience, but then also the next level is how do we build champions? How do we build someone in an organization who's going to take Wiz, adopt it really well, make sure the teams in their organization know how to use it, it's in their workflows, they feel empowered using it, they have the clear context that happens with Wiz across the board. And then how do we then tell that story upwards? So the CISO sees the value, the board sees the value. And I think understanding all the levels of an organization and making sure they are ready and able to like thrive with Wiz. And not for it to be some like difficult, complex tool, but really to like help them to fly with Wiz.
So kind of like the secret, the secret weapon. Who's the immediate buyer who's buying the product? Because basically Wiz is their secret weapon, right? You help them to perform better in their job, in their program, right?
Yeah, so I think that I think it depends on the organization, but you have the person buying Wiz and you have the person implementing Wiz. And I think that we work with both of them to make sure the person buying Wiz sees the value. What is the business value? What are the KPIs of our security program that have increased? And then there's the practitioner or the champion, we call them, who goes and takes Wiz and make sure it's set up, that everyone knows how to use it, that everyone knows what it looks like to be doing it well. And I think that's a huge part of it. Like, what does it look like to be thriving and to actually have like key markers of success in your program? And
there's also what I'm going to call them the working ends, let's say, right? That they need to implement and eventually do some stuff, probably mostly R&D people, right? Like developers, but you need to engage them as well. And they don't really have any incentive to help you, right?
Yeah. So in terms
you as like the program manager.
Exactly. Right? So I think that part of it, there's a bunch of ways in which we engage them. One, right, is we bring the context to them. I think that's a really key piece of, we're not going to, ship you far away, but to bring you that context right to where you are and into your pipelines and into your workflows. And then another thing we've done at Wiz, which is super cool, is what we've called gamification of Wiz, right? So we incentivize you with achievements that your teams can win. So whether it's the vulnerability team or, the AppSec team, and they have a very clear marker that they've done a good job. So we help incentivize them by implementing gamification, by building an experience in Wiz that's refined to that practitioner. So instead of Wiz has this immense amount of value you can get and receive and use, but at the end of the day, if I'm doing a very specific role, how do I reach you where you are and give you that very direct experience?
Sounds great. Mm-hmm. Let's take it back a sec and maybe explain about the products that you are managing.
Yeah. So I get to work on something called product platforms at Wiz, which is really cool because Wiz is doing all this amazing work across the board, and I get to take part in lots of it and kind of see how we build this experience as a unified experience. And make sure that the companies and organizations that are using Wiz get the most value across the board. So in parts of that, in the beginning, I got to work on something called Health at Wiz, which is to make sure that you actually connect well to Wiz. Which
the first integration.
And then down the road that someone didn't write us some line or change some setting that ruined our ability to scan your environment. And so making sure that it's super clear and concise. What does it mean to have a health issue? And how do we help you fix it? So got to work on that. And then I got to work on something called the Champion Center, which is this amazing tool for champions to understand their current status and how they build an effective program. So what are the steps to take? What do they need to do to be ready? What does it look like to be doing well? How are they trending? Understanding their usage, understanding holistically what it means to be doing well, and then have really key indicators to go forward.
Wow, that's so cool. So first of all, like it went successful. I'm going back to the integration part, right?
The health?
Yeah, the health.
Yes. I always like when the name, when you remember when you came up with a name and then everyone's using the name and you're like, wow, this is going well. Yeah. It's trending.
Sweet and related to storytelling, probably. Yes. So you fixed the health, or not fix the health, you improved the health. And then you focused on giving those champions a place to actually, after they get all the data from those integrations, right? Okay, let's start doing something beautiful with it, right?
Yes.
Something insightful.
I think it's that. And I also think it's... we want to be able to take them through this journey, like obviously not holding their hands physically, but holding their hands to like Wiz is your partner in building a strong security program. And so we're with you every every step of the way.
And I can see that you're really passionate about it.
Yeah.
As you are knocking on the table, but actually, like, how did you understand the world? How did you go ahead and done the discovery for that?
So I can talk about it Wiz, but I think it might be helpful to actually zoom way back, which is when I was 16, I went to work on Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. And taking everyone back in the history books, if they don't remember, but the Russians attacked the campaign and the Democratic Party at the time. So I was there during, after, I went to work for the DNC after. And so I saw firsthand what the impact of being on that side of things was, which was very insightful. And in 2020 vision, when I look back, I see how that kind of brought me where I am today. And then fast forward, engineering degree later, everything, I get to Wiz. And I worked with customers. Like I worked with them weekly to understand what was their experience adopting the tool. Where were they getting stuck? Where were they thriving? Where did they need extra support? And Wiz today protects 45% of the Fortune 100 companies and a ton more. And so when you think about like the impact that has and how do you, and to me, it's really exciting. Like we're protecting people across the board. So how do I help make sure that they're actually doing a good job at it? And so I think the discovery came largely from working with customers. I think it came from building these tools, getting the feedback, and we work really closely with customers. That's what's also really cool about being a PM at Wiz. Like you build something, you get their feedback, and you're constantly iterating, and it's like this really effective feedback loop.
Which is amazing in B2B, right? But also, do you think that working on the podcast also helped you to better understand or maybe also tell the other side story?
Yes, I think it's like the podcast keeps my feet on the ground because you're hearing what's actually happening. You're not just stuck in the product, which is like theoretical and preventative. And, you're working with the companies, but like, what does it look like all the way through? And it gives you kind of all of the different perspectives.
And probably the context as well.
Yes.
And if we go back and talk for a second about storytelling, because I'm kind of curious, was there anything else in your past that led you there?
I've always been a very creative person. So I've found myself in really cool environments. I got to build a docuseries for the head of Warner Brothers a bunch of years back. I got to be a part of a lot of, I even think in politics, like you're telling a story, you're selling a candidate, right? And so the idea of storytelling to me feels like a very natural way. And even in cybersecurity, right? Like at Wiz, we're not selling the tale, like the old tale of like to be scared and anxious. No, like we're empowering you. You've got this. We're giving you the context. We're going to equip your teams to succeed. And I think that's like a story that I personally I buy into, but I actually think is like a really effective way to do cybersecurity. And so everything that we're doing, whether it's the podcast or we're building these tools and the product, it really like it works. We see that it's a really positive way to improve people's cybersecurity.
I guess that it's both that, the positivity, but also it sounds like you are going ahead and simplifying stuff, right? If you're talking about gamification, I'm kind of eager to hear how, like a case study or some example of how it's actually been done.
Yeah. So one thing we did in gamification that's super cool is in all of the pillars of Wiz, you can win achievements. For example, in Wiz, we incentivize organizations to get to 0 criticals. What does that mean if you get to 0 criticals? It means that we have looked and prioritized critical issues in your environment. And if you successfully got to 0 criticals, we reward you. It's exciting.
You're golden.
You're
right?
golden. You get an achievement, you get a badge, you get swag, and it makes it like very clear to your team where you're headed and what it looks like to get there.
This is amazing. It actually helps you to also storytell your story better, right? Within the organization for his peers or her peers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice marketing move. Okay.
It's funny because it's like you can think about it as marketing, but it's really also like tangibly what it looks like to be doing an effective job. Yeah.
Right? That's good marketing.
Yes.
I'm kind of curious before we'll continue. Maybe you can tell us a bit about your everyday. Maybe it will help you to know you better.
Yeah. So I wake up, I go surfing, it has waves. But no, what I get to do at Wiz, which is cool, is I get to balance the role of being a product manager and do the podcast. And being a PM at Wiz, what's really cool about it, it's like being the CEO of your own domain. And I don't say that lightly, you know, every product in Wiz could replace another product in the industry. And truly compete with giants. It's amazing what the products at Wiz individually and then super amazing holistically what they do. And so you're definitely not a small screw in the system. It's very empowering in the day-to-day when you're looking at running this domain. So you do everything that's both like the internal side of things, designing features in Figma, bringing it to UX review, working with your developers to make sure it's implemented, troubleshooting it, if there are bugs, building and designing BI metrics. And then on the flip side of things, externally, what does that look like? So talking to customers and doing discovery, figuring out pricing, speaking at conferences and to analysts, building a roadmap, working and talking to the field. There's no shortage of things to do. So I'd say a large part of my day are kind of those things, depending on where a product's at and where in its life cycle it is. And then on the other hand, I get to work on the podcast, which is a different context switch, and it's researching guests that are going to join and sitting with Amitai, who's brilliant, and talking about what's happening and digesting the news and how it happened and how to bring that to our listeners in a really effective way.
That's so cool. And you also get there to keep yourself up, right? Like with the latest news in the industry, etc. Which
we're like obsessed with the Twitter feeds, the newsletters, everything that's happening.
That's so cool. And how long have you been working for Wiz?
For 3 years.
So you pretty much from the beginning, right? Or almost.
Not the beginning,
not the beginning of beginning, not the sheets, but
yeah.
3 years ago, like wow, it's already 2025.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So, but anyways, since then you've been working closely with customers, right?
Since the beginning.
And what's like the the most insightful insight that you came up with after interviewing all these people in the podcast, discussing this topic, talking with so many clients and different users? What did this world need? Like the industry of, cybersecurity?
I feel like every time there's a need, and I don't even say this like facetiously, Wiz goes and builds it. Like, and it's like this constant iteration. So I would like answer you one now, and then they'll build it in a few months. It feels like even as I've gone through this 3-year amazing journey, right? And it's been this crazy rocket ship and exciting. And truly, like, you see the needs, and this is what's so cool about Wiz. What Wiz does is they're so tuned in to the needs of their customers that, like, as you see a need, it's like, cool, we introduce Wiz Code, we introduce Wiz Defend, the way we work with integrations and partners, and it's incredible to be a part of, but it's also incredible to witness up close.
I'm asking that because, you hear and talk about so many things probably, right? But then, like in a genius way, I guess, you went ahead and invested in gamification, in UX, right? How come?
I think that what you see, it's really not trivial, the world of cloud and cloud security. And listen, like the security team in a company, they're not like, everyone's not doing what the security team, you need to empower them. We need to help make them strong in an organization, hold the clout to go make sure that things are going well. And I think, how do we make it, and this goes back to simplifying security, right? That like they're not going to come hound on your door with a million things. We're going to say, hey, here's what's most important. Here's what we need. And so I think that's kind of where we came to that, which is as we continue to enrich things further and give you more context and more visibility. Okay, so now what do I do with that? And how do I give you a tool to go to bring it to life, kind of?
So that's what you meant by holding their hand, right? Mm-hmm. So what are you focusing right now, like in the day-to-day?
So some things we can say stay tuned, but one of the things that we're working on that's really cool is we've built a feature where right now, Wiz, when you come into Wiz, depending on who you are as a persona, you have just like your own very clear version of Wiz that's built to what your needs are, what issues you should be seeing. And so that's a super cool thing I'm working on at the moment.
I like it that you're into personalization, but also gamification. But let's double click on that for a sec. Where do you get inspiration for gamification related features?
I think what's cool about Wiz, I'll say this first of all about inspiration for Wiz. Wiz, what's one of the things I love about working at Wiz, you can come up with a crazy idea, and I promise you every day I come up with crazy ideas, and they're actually like, yeah, let's make it happen. And it's very exciting to be a part of a company that's like, yeah, your creativity gets to come to life. And it's not crazy creativity, right? It's with a purpose and a goal, and it's along the lines of what we're trying to accomplish as a company. But whether it's like Duolingo, and we're all excited to go into that app and keep learning and maintain your streak.
That's like the number one thing.
Yep. Don't want to lose your streak.
So let me know about this. So in the podcast, are there a few examples or maybe interesting episodes? Probably all of them are interesting, but maybe you can list just one or two that we can remind and leave here for later listening.
Yeah, I'll give you a taste to make you intrigued to follow our podcast. But let's see. There are a lot of good episodes. There is one that we had a lot. I mean, we have a lot of fun every time, but I think that's just like the MO of our podcast. We have fun recording our podcast. But we had on the podcast this guy named Sam Curry. He's this ethical hacker, bug bounty hunter, pen tester, super cool guy. And he came on, and like even researching was so cool. He's like broken into like half the car industry, like tons of these, like all the names, the household names of cars, and like gaining extensive control into vehicle functionalities like crazy. Or one time he hacked into like the point system of a bunch of airlines. I remember I was like, so can you get us business class for life? And he was like, no, I'm an ethical hacker. But what's cool is like you hear about the idea of someone like that, and you're like, he's this hacker behind a screen. Who is he? How did he get there? They're just like, oh, we know he's this guy, and here's how he got there, and here's the story of how it happened, and then he actually worked with them to fix it, and it kind of brings to life something that I think it's usually like ominous in our heads. If you're not in the world of like security, you're like, security, what is it? So that was a really cool episode. Another episode, Wiz does really cool research. The research team is amazing. So I'm always like, what are you guys working on? We did an episode talking about a vulnerability they found in, it's called Olama. It's a tool for AI models that like packages and deploys them. And it's open source and tons of people use it. And then they found a remote code execution vulnerability. And it's really interesting how they found it and how it works. And that I'll save you for the podcast. But I think what's interesting about it is everyone's so excited about AI because it's this remarkable, revolutionary tool. And I think even when we think about what we do at Wiz, like we want you to go run and build amazing things, but we want you to build it securely. And there's like a lot of impacts to it not being done securely. And so to hear about this, I think for people to have like the awareness of the tools they're using and the potential impact of what you're building, even if, you know, you're not like responsible for the security yourself. You're building something, but it has implications what you're building. And so it's cool to hear about like these things that went down.
It also sounds like a good thing to do before you go into an interview in a cyber-related company, right?
Absolutely. You'll be really in the know. And you'll be, sometimes like when I even read things, to read them a few times to like understand it. But when you listen to the podcast, it's like, it's easy. It's digestible. It's the pocket-sized version of understanding what's going down in cyber.
That's actually good. Like, let's stick to that. Maybe you have a few more suggestions or recommendations on how to get into cyber for products who work outside of the industry.
Interesting. I come from like a completely non-traditional way to get into it. First of all, more just in a product perspective, I studied operations research. And I think it is, I tout this all the time, I think it's the most useful degree ever. I think you can apply it to many different industries. But the skills it gave me, I'm very grateful for. So I will say that as a general fun fact. I think, I don't know if this is like the textbook answer, but I'll say how I do things, whether it's politics or cybersecurity. The internet is just flooding with information. If you're curious, like, and you decide to just jump in, there is so much to take in and to just kind of get your hands dirty. But that's my approach to things. I'm like, let's jump in and we'll go from there.
and besides that, so again, this is a question that I actually ask on each episode. Mm-hmm. What do you think are the most crucial or important product skills in a product manager?
One of the things I really respect, especially with the PMs that I get to work with, and I really admire them, is it's a large combination of skills, right? Like, first of all, to be deeply technical, like what you're building, and like to really understand the nitty gritty. Wiz, for example, like we work closely with the backend developers and understanding what you're building and how you're building it. So I think to be very technical and to ask questions and to be like, really to make sure that you can paint the whole picture of what's going on. And I think also like a huge one is to be a really effective communicator, because as a PM, you have to communicate well with all of the stakeholders, whether it is the developers or it's the research team or it's the field that you're working with that's going and bringing your feature out to the world, or it's customers. And always you're very inward and outward bound, right? So you have to be able to communicate with your internal stakeholders and your external stakeholders. And so to be a really strong communicator, and I think to be able to see something at a very high level, but then also to execute very well. And I think that's like to be an effective PM, like you can't just have the good idea, but then you have to take it down into every detail and make sure the execution of it is
perfect,
well
or
done.
at least good enough.
Yeah.
To get a concrete decision at the end,
yes.
Right? By the way, do you guys run A/B tests or usually not? I don't know.
It depends on the feature, but there is a lot of testing of features, and sometimes we work closely with customers who give really good feedback. Sometimes we release it to just subsets of customers. I think we do a lot of testing of features, but also we like to get it out there and get feedback on what we're building.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah.
So probably this is one of them, what are the main challenges that you're facing? Of course, you as a PM in Wiz.
Wiz, and you can read it in the news, right? We're like at this crazy pace, and it means that we're building really fast, and it's really exciting. It's exhilarating, and it's like so cool that you're seeing your ideas come to life so fast and seeing how effective they are. But it also means you have to execute well at a really fast pace. And so being able to make sure that detail isn't lost in that speed, I think is really important and also challenging. That's one that's challenging. I think, what are other challenges? Wow, at Wiz, you work with like the smartest people you'll ever meet. That's really cool and exciting, but it also means like you're being challenged. I like I said that in the most like honest definition of the word, but like you have an idea and that you're going to get pushback in a really good way. And that's why what comes out at the end is really good, because, you know, you're in this constant fight for what's best. That's challenging. Probably
also remaining persevere is something that requires, right?
Yeah.
In that environment.
So anyone who knows me knows I'm like obsessed with my hobbies. So I play Fuji volley, I'm a dancer, I surf. And I think that it's really critical also. So when you show up every day and your brain's fresh and you're like excited and clear-minded, I'm a big believer in, I mean, I call them hobbies, but like your passions. And I think that it's important because that's what you bring at the end of the day to what you're doing is, you know, not just your brain and its ideas, but like holistically how you show up to work with people and also enjoy your life.
No, but I actually understand. That's for sure. Remaining positive and enjoy your life. But it's the first time actually that someone brought it up to actually show up every day regarding to anything. I like it. Another thing, I guess that regarding the first thing that you mentioned, that you need to act fast, right? And execute fast. And it also means that you need to remember to also go back to those successful things and also invest in them and not just leaving them, you know, untouched for a while, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's like learning what works less, but like learning from it and constantly being able to like reflect, whether it's literally a product where like, okay, this did really well or this did less well, and what worked, what didn't, but also internally. Okay, I did this way or I did this another way, and kind of, I think that's how you grow as an individual, whether or not you're a product manager, but especially if you're a product manager, where you being able to iterate on that feedback loop, I think is only positive.
That's so cool. And remind me, that's your first job as a PM, right?
Yeah.
So another thing that I'm taking from this, I guess it's a great tip that you haven't mentioned, is that if you want to get really deep into your basically your industry, but especially in your first work, having a podcast, for example, or actually eating your own dog food and actually getting into the details, it's such an amazing and great route that you took. I love it.
Thank you.
I'm doing the same. So how did you actually get into the first role as a PM?
I became a PM at Wiz. I kind of fell into it. I joined Wiz as a solutions architect. I was excited to just be a part of Wiz, whatever I could get my hands on. And I started, I learned the product inside and out. I worked with customers. I really understood the experience of using Wiz. And kind of, I think from a very specific need I saw from working with customers, I built my first piece of product in Wiz.
But let me ask you this. How did you actually get into Wiz?
How did I get into Wiz? That's a funnier story. I heard about this company. I just came back to Israel. And everyone's like, it's really cool. And I was like, what do they do? I don't fully grasp what they do. And I like begged everyone to try and answer my messages to get into Wiz, and no one answered. And then finally someone answered, and he got on a call with me, and he said that he liked my energy. I had good energy. He was like, all right, I'll pass you along. And then they gave me the homework assignment. I think, I had a technical background, but I got that assignment. I was like, well, I don't know how to do anything on this page. And then I I remember this week, I locked myself in my apartment. I was like, there's no Friday night dinner. I sat there and I studied everything. Anything I get my hands on to study. And I did the assignment. And actually, the story fully goes that I broke my computer a few days before while getting a mani-pedi. And I showed up with the presentation of what I had built. I explained it as best I can. And I think Wiz took a gamble on me, but I was like ready to just eat, breathe, sleep cybersecurity. I became obsessed, with what Wiz did and does, but also this like cyber, the world of security.
And what happened next? Okay, so you are working as a solution architect. Amazing that you got into that. How long? Like you are there for 3 years, right?
Yeah, I guess all the times blur because slowly I started doing more and more product work, but I was still working with customers and I was getting into a lot of really cool things. I was in the CTO organization and they do really fascinating initiatives and get to like kind of push the boundaries in a lot of ways and understand how we work with the field. And then I like slowly started doing more and more product and now I am full-time working on product work.
In which point you actually understood that you want to be a PM?
From the moment I built a piece of product, I loved it. It's exciting. It's listen, like even going back to my days in politics, when you get to build something and see it come to life, it is like it's a high. It's exhilarating. And so getting to do that at Wiz when you also see so immediately the impact of it and like the type of customers and the people that get to reap the rewards of what you've built, it's amazing.
For closure, it was a great episode, I think, and very nice to talk to you as well. What do you wish yourself in 10 years from now?
That's a good question. First of all, I love building things. I have loved building things since I was a kid, and I was like building 3D printers and electric longboards, and now I get to build things at Wiz, which is a dream and so cool. But I hope I keep building, and I hope what I keep building continues to feel and is impacting people. I think, I got into politics at a young age, which I think was amazing, but also it's disappointing. You lose an election, you don't really get to make much change. But when you work on product, it's like you build one thing and many, many people reap the rewards. And so I hope I get to keep building things. I hope I keep surfing and dancing and enjoying life. And I hope, that I get to keep seeing the benefits of what I get to do in the world.
I wish you exactly that.
Thank you.
Sounds like a great world.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Fun one.
Thank you so much, Eden, for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was super fun.
Sure. And again, we're going to leave a few links on the show notes and bye-bye.
ביי.
ביי. היי חברים, תודה על ההקשבה. אם מצאתם את הפודקאסט הזה בעל ערך, תוכלו להירשם, לעקוב אחרינו, כמובן לפרקים נוספים בספוטיפיי, אפל פודקאסט או כל אפליקציה אחרת. כמובן שאם לא מצאתם אותנו באיזושהי אפליקציה, אשמח שתכתבו לנו. נשמח מאוד ל5 כוכבים בכל פלטפורמה ושתעקבו אחרינו כדי שעוד מאזינים יוכלו להיחשף אלינו ולמצוא את הפודקאסט. אתם גם יכולים למצוא את הפרקים הקודמים בכל אפליקציה או בערוץ היוטיוב, יש לנו לינקים בתיאור. אז עד הפעם הבאה, יאללה, תהיו יעילים וביי ביי.